Panasonic, the heart of your system.
I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru. I'm here at Caesars Palace, Las Vegas for CES 2019 with both DeepCool and Gamerstorm because it's one and the same company with two brands. We're going to start with the obligatory RGB just because, you know. These are actually coolers that we saw at Computex 6 months ago. So Gamerstorm brand, Castle 360 RGB, obviously a 360, and the Castle refers to the nature and the styling of the pump. Loads of RGB, bit of an infinity thing going on down there. Moving across, we've got the Captain 240 Pro, so 240 this time, again different pump housing. The Pro part refers to, they've got like a pressure release system inside, so it can constantly top up the coolant, hence you've got these kind of little tank things on either end of the radiator, which is slightly unusual. So that's obviously aimed at increasing reliability of your all-in-one. Having said that, I think most of us would agree that the problem with all-in-ones, typically if there is a problem, is the pump rather than the amount of coolant. But if you keep your pump wet, it tends to be happier. Moving around, we've got two cases, black and white, called Mcube 550. I'm struggling with the name because the name basically is sort of a mashup of Magic Cube. We can agree they're not cubes, that's just all there is to it. So black and white versions. They do, however, have some neat features. So for example, you get two drive caddies with support the 3.5-inch hard drive, but each of these caddies will support dual drives. You put one in the caddy, and then you put a second drive on top, so you can double up. So although two caddies support for 4 drives, plus SSDs, of course. So black and white, as you see. Is it easiest for... let's pull the panel off this one. Dead straightforward, magnets, and you literally pull it, and you lift it, and there we go. And even one-handed I can do it. Now, can we put it back on one-handed in front of a room full of appalled DeepCool people? Look at that. No crashing of glass. You have to just see the relief on the face there. So the magnets are on the inside of the chassis and it's just steel there. Nifty little way of doing it. My one concern at the moment looking at this is that the intake, they call it like a levitation design. If you come around the side, Briony, and just give us a good look, and it's basically a slot. So the intake would appear to be quite restrictive. It's going to take some testing to actually determine whether or not that's actually a problem. Now, it's quite important to say the fans that are shown are extras. They've packed it out with their own hardware to give you the maximum amount of bling. So what you see is not what you get, but what you see is what you can do with it. Clearly, this is the white version. The black version, on the other hand, is sat over there, not running, and looks absolutely like a piece of stone. So quite a contrast. Moving down the line, some MF120S fans. This is interesting. It's a vertical graphics mount. Essentially, it's two parts you can actually see there. You've got the bracket itself, and then you've got the cable. They're in the territory of 25 and 30 bucks or some such. We'll put the exact figures on the page at Kit Guru, and clearly it's what it is. So it's to support your graphics card and connect it to a slot so that you don't get... that's pretty sturdy. So that is obviously what it is. And the cable for what these things are is relatively cheap because cables can be 50 or even 80. Obviously, it depends on length. They can be brutally expensive. This thing here, GH1 RGB, not the greatest of names, but is actually this component here. So it's a mechanical support for a horizontal graphics card. Obviously an aftermarket heavy card would be the obvious thing. In this case, you've got an Asus Strix in there. As you know, they are beastly heavy. The case itself, Matrix 70, now that's a budget model, 70 bucks. Available in April 2019. They're showing it with all these lovely fans and such like. You don't get the lovely fans. The lovely fans are not part of the deal. In fact, the lovely fans from memory are going to cost you more than the case. I think I'm right about that. So it's a budget case. It's got quite restrictive air intakes here. But then realistically, if you're building a performance PC into a budget case, well, you know, you're going to suffer. So I'm saying budget case for the Matrix 70, but this is the budgety case, which is the Matrix 55. Clearly it's in white, but that doesn't relate to the price or the spec. 65 bucks, that's coming even sooner. And once again, they're packed it out with the RGB. As cases go cheap, as to how they perform, we're going to have to try them. But clearly the configuration, as ever, is going to make a massive difference. I'm guessing that each of these cases that comes with, is shown with like 3, 6, 7 fans here, is going to come with one black fan at the rear. That's my guess. Possibly one white fan at the rear. But all these posh RGB fans and the multiple fans, you ain't going to get those for that price. And then to wrap up, let's go to the other side of the room. And to finish up, we have an air cooler, but it's a big air cooler. The big air cooler is there. It's called Assassin 3, and as far as I can see, it's essentially 2 coolers put together. Absolutely enormous thing. TDP rating 280 watts. Handles everything apart from Threadripper. Quite clearly, the TDP rating would easily manage Threadripper. But the mount is different. And they tell me there is no plan to put a Threadripper version into production. That screwdriver is part of the deal, because clearly once you've taken the middle fan out, you need to get to the mounting screws that are in the middle. We've seen very, very similar things in the past from a number of people, including Be Quiet and Noctua. The principle of the more area, the better the cooling. We know about that. We've seen it before. So that feels right. Quite clearly, ho ho, that's a pun. How much clearance you have to your RAM depends on whether or not you've got the fan overhanging. So you've got a minimum 30 mil, shift the fan or take the fan off and you've got 55 mil. So depending on what kind of RAM you've got, you might either be absolutely fine or maybe not, depending, and this is the word, depending on your configuration. Nonetheless, that cooler, interesting. And again, it's going to come down to benchmarking and testing to see how well it works. It's expensive. It's a cent under $100. And that's coming from May 2019, so that's what we in the trade say is Computex. So $100 is relatively expensive, but then it looks like a huge, great cooler, and quite clearly that's up to the task of Core i9, which is these days the benchmark for most processors. And that was our quick tour of the DeepCool Gamerstorm room at Caesars Palace, CES 2019. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, if you absolutely must, give it a thumbs down, but don't give it a thumbs down. Hit the bell button, tell you about new videos as they become available. I'm Leo Waldock, this is Kit Guru at CES 2019.